Well, this video comes very prematurely. Spidey's time in the MCU is over. He's off to join his own kind in the Venomverse. His party with other big-time superheroes has come to an end, which I guess makes some sense as there aren't really many big-time superheroes left when all is said and done. So I guess now is as good a time as any for him to go hang out with Venom and Morbius for a bit. For better or for worse, that's what's happening now. To hear more about that, I've got plenty of videos about it on my channel, so why don't you check them out. So Spider-Man has appeared in 5 Marvel Cinematic Universe films: Captain America Civil War, Spider-Man Homecoming, Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame, and Spider-Man Far From Home. And I pretty much know all of these films religiously. I've seen them all multiple occasions because I love Spider-Man and I love Marvel, so why wouldn't I? So in this video, I'm going to be counting down the top 10 best Spider-Man scenes in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So sit back, relax, subscribe. We're gonna go through some Spidey moments. Starting off with number 10, the Battle of New York from Avengers Infinity War. This moment is pretty much exactly what I would expect from Spider-Man in a crossover movie. Iron Man is fighting off Cull Obsidian, Doctor Strange is fighting off Ebony Maw, it's all going down in the city, and of course, Spider-Man swoops in, with a number of different one-liners and his childlike charm, rocking his classic red and blue suit before changing to the Iron Spider later on in the film. It's a massive, sprawling New York battle scene. What's obviously not to love about this, but it's a scene of firsts for Spider-Man. In Civil War, we'd only seen Spider-Man interact in Berlin. In Spider-Man Homecoming, he never actually ventured into New York City, spending most of his time in Queens, and away from the island of Manhattan. Avengers Infinity War is our first time seeing Spider-Man actually in New York City. Well, the Tom Holland Spider-Man anyway. And it's fun to see him involved in a battle that's so much bigger than him, having to help and rescue superheroes he's never heard of before, and chase after aliens, eventually chasing them to their massive ship. We had never seen anything like this for Spidey before, and while we only get it for a brief moment, it is so good to finally see Tom Holland's Spider-Man swinging through the skyscrapers of New York. It's a truly outstanding scene. And remember, this is not a straight up ranking of all Spidey moments in the MCU, it is the top 10, so this is still a terrific place to be, is bottom of my top 10. In 9th place, we have Spidey versus the Winter Soldier and Falcon from Captain America Civil War. Before truly throwing Spidey into the deep end with his own villains, Captain America had to sell us on Spider-Man amongst the other heroes of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So it was in the big airport battle in Berlin that we saw Spidey interacting with other heroes for the very first time on screen. And they really took advantage of this being Spidey's first appearance in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because rather than fighting his own foes or fighting somebody new, he's battling against the Winter Soldier and Falcon. Pitting Spidey against the Winter Soldier of all people was probably the smartest move they could do, as we've been shown what a strength, what a powerhouse the Winter Soldier is, even just for Captain America to battle. Having this 15-year-old kid taking on that metal arm is, well, it's worrying, put it that way. But Spidey makes such quick work of him. If Spider-Man were in Captain America the Winter Soldier, the film would have been over a lot quicker. But we get to see Spidey in all his glory, swinging around the airport, wearing his classic red and blue suit, sass-talking his other Marvel superheroes, in his very first big battle in a war where he really has no idea what's going on. When it comes to Marvel crossover events, this is pure Spidey goodness. In 8th place, I've chosen the That Spider Guy scene from Spider-Man Homecoming. Spider-Man Homecoming didn't keep us waiting too long to see Spider-Man in action, and the That Spider Guy scene sets the scene for what kind of Spider-Man movie this is going to be, one like we've never actually seen before, with a montage of Spider-Man helping people out in the outskirts of New York City. This sequence does not rely on any familiar Spider-Man tropes. We don't see any massive incredible feats, we don't glorify Spider-Man, because he doesn't take center stage in this universe. It's the first time we see the general public reacting to Spider-Man in a world that's already populated by superheroes. We don't have major web-swinging sequences here either. It's solely just a means of Spider-Man getting from A to B, so it's far from the high-flying action of the Spider-Man montage scene near the beginning of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. But it's a lot better in my opinion, as it says a lot more about this character of Spider-Man. He takes back a stolen bicycle, he helps an old lady off the street, he does a flip for some nearby civilians, he sits on top of a train for a bit, he practices using his web as a tightrope, he attempts to web swing at one point but messes it up and lands flat on his face. It definitely gives us that John Hughes Spider-Man movie sort of thing, but I think my favorite moment in there is when he tries to stop a guy from stealing a car when it turns out it's just the guy's car that he's just trying to get into. A great bit of comedy. And to be honest, it really just proves that Spider-Man is just fun. Even when the stakes aren't high, he's just a fun character to be in the presence of. This was exactly the kind of Spider-Man moment we needed to show that this was a new Spider-Man, unlike anything we'd ever seen before from this character. In 7th place, we have the final swing from Spider-Man Far From Home. Okay, guys, but before we get to that, I found this on my Facebook newsfeed. You guys need to check this out. Bean. Until the very end of Spider-Man Far From Home, we'd only seen a few seconds of Spider-Man swinging through New York City, as we all know he does. Spidey swinging through New York has been kind of a trope in previous Spider-Man films. It's been kind of a narrative payoff in the Sam Raimi films, and of course a very big source of thrills in those films, because they were all about the thrills. It was kind of a bit of a crutch in the Amazing Spider-Man films. They still kind of used it as that same thrill factor, but without really earning it in the same way as the Sam Raimi films did. Like, the Amazing Spider-Man 2 begins with him web swinging through New York City, and yeah, it's truly dazzling, don't get me wrong, but it's just kind of more of a crux in the Amazing Spider-Man movies. They did visualize it really well there, though. And here it is the culmination of Spider-Man truly coming into his own. When it comes to final swings, they usually wrap up everything Peter has learned over the course of the films, and in this case, it wraps up everything Peter has learned over the course of 5 films. It's kind of the ultimate sign of Peter's independence now. The journey into adolescence. Spider-Man is here now, and the world is his oyster. It just gives us such a feel-good feeling, you know? It's a grand celebration of Spidey's MCU tenure. But as well as that, I think this is one of the longest web-swinging sequences we've had in one of these Spider-Man films. It's about a solid minute long, if I remember right. Which is great, because web-swinging tended to be pretty much transitional in previous films. Michael Giacchino's triumphant Spider-Man score is in full swing. Peter has just gotten the girl. It really brings back memories of Spider-Man 2, to be honest. And he's wearing that gorgeous red and black suit, which I just love so much. And they do a lot more with the web swinging than we've really seen in the past. I don't think there's quite as much stunt work as there was in the Amazing Spider-Man 2's web swinging, but like, for example, we see the web wings come out and Spider-Man gliding through buildings. And as well as that, he's swinging to his date with MJ. And he's texting while he swings, he's taking pictures of himself. There's just so much character coming from this one. And of course, who doesn't love the Insomniac Games Easter egg in there? In 6th place, we have the interrogation mode scene from Spider-Man Homecoming. This is probably one of the funniest scenes in Spider-Man history. Peter Parker has just gotten rid of the training wheels protocol on his Spider-Man suit, and he's accessing all of the new benefits that come with it. So we see Spider-Man accessing interrogation mode for his interrogation of Aaron Davis. And it is hilarious to see Spider-Man coming out with this
deep, computerized robot voice.
While he's still got that signature Tom Holland Spider-Man body language. And what's funnier yet is how Spidey reacts verbally to what Aaron Davis is saying to him, because it doesn't match the voice that he has. When Aaron Davis says he heard him before, he knows what a little girl sounds like, and Peter just responds with,
"I'm not a girl, I'm a boy. I mean, I'm a man."
This scene just had me snickering. He's trying to convince Aaron that he's this big, intimidating adult superhero, and Aaron Davis is just seeing right through it, and it's just so much fun to see what a failure that is. But then, of course, Peter Parker, he always gets back up. He does get the information he needs by just being nice, and then he webs Aaron Davis's hand to his car, and then he just runs off sass-talking him. It's just brilliant. I definitely was skeptical about all the different functionalities of the Stark suit in Spider-Man Homecoming before seeing the film, but when I saw how creative they got with it and how that suit interacts with Peter, like it does here with the deep voice modulation and everything, that was just brilliant. Absolutely hilarious. You can bellyache all you want about Spider-Man's lack of independence in Spider-Man Homecoming. Like, it's good filmmaking. It's a good movie, leave it be. In 5th place is Monumental Mayhem from Spider-Man Homecoming. I love this scene not just for what it is, but also what it kind of represents for the MCU going forward. I'd had a bit of an issue with Marvel Studios films, particularly say Age of Ultron and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, with jokes in these scenes becoming kind of intrusive. When the film is kind of trying to set up a high-stakes situation, but then a joke comes along and it completely diminishes all of the tension in that scene. The monumental meltdown scene in Spider-Man Homecoming, yes, it does have some comedic moments in there, but those comedic moments contribute to the tension. There are moments of cinematic irony where the person on the tour of the Washington Monument is saying, "Don't worry, everything is fine, our safety systems are fully functional," and then immediately after that we get Karen telling Peter that the security safety systems are completely failing. And there are are a lot of jokes at the very end of this scene after Spider-Man has saved the day, including a little reference to Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man film, where Karen the onboard AI tells Peter to kiss Liz while he's upside down. For starters, this was our first time on the big screen seeing Spider-Man outside of New York City, which was a very exciting event for me. It was also our first time seeing the web wings, and it was our first time in this film seeing Peter climbing a very high up structure. And it's here where we realize that Peter Parker has a fear of heights, and I just think that's an absolutely fantastic addition to the character. But I just love that this scene was one of the first instances in the Marvel Cinematic Universe where I was actually concerned for the safety of characters' lives in this scene. And they were able to do this without revisiting the trope of, oh, the girlfriend gets kidnapped. We're attached to this collective of characters that Peter Parker associates with. And that's another thing, these are Peter's classmates. He knows all of these people really well, and I love that they acknowledge that Peter Parker tries to disguise his voice when he's around them by putting on an accent. Again, it's hilarious, but it doesn't negate the stakes. And all the different gadgets on Peter's suit really only scare him all the more. Tom Holland's performance here is also brilliant because he sounds so stressed out during this scene. It's a really stressful sequence, and I think at the time this came out, it was one of the best moments in the entire MCU, for my opinion. Now, I will say there is one little issue I have with this scene, and it's how reliant Spidey is on his CGI model at times. In the trailer, there's a shot where Spider-Man is climbing the Washington Monument, and it looks like green-screened footage of Spider-Man climbing it physically. In the film, though, he spends a lot of time as a fully digital character, and I gotta say, it's a little noticeable. I definitely prefer practical effects as and where possible. And that's probably my one criticism of Spider-Man Homecoming, is that it does abuse the fully CGI Spidey perhaps a little too much. In fourth place, we have the Prague battle from Spider-Man Far From Home. This is actually the first time in the film that we see Spider-Man actually suit up for battle, unless we're talking about the extended cut. The first half of Spider-Man Far From Home is very, very Peter-centric, so this is the point where it becomes more of a Spider-Man movie. Oh wait, no, scratch that. This is the part where it becomes a Night Monkey movie. So for starters, seeing Spider-Man battle side by side one of his enemies isn't really something we've seen since Spider-Man 3. Also, Spider-Man in a black suit is not something we've seen since Spider-Man 3. And Spider-Man fighting a giant demon is not something we've seen since... well, actually, we just haven't seen that. It's safe to say that Spider-Man Far From Home upped the ante on the battle scenes. But Jon Watts does seem to love a good bit of tension in his action sequences. He loves putting beloved characters' lives at risk, as Ned and Betty sit suspended in a Ferris wheel while Molten Man is on the rampage. The stakes are seriously high in this scene, and seeing Spidey's acrobatics with Mysterio's magic is just a superb sequence. And I think one other thing I really love about this scene is how Michael Giacchino overlaps Mysterio's heroic theme with Spider-Man's theme in this sequence. Their team up is just so exciting to watch. Molten Man is really well introduced and really well set up. Prague is the perfect backdrop for this fight, honestly. It looks so amazing, especially during this festival. Civilians are in danger, everything is going down. It feels like a return to sort of the Sam Raimi style of fight scene. And just this BS character that Quentin Becker's come up with, Mysterio, how he talks, how he behaves, how he makes that sort of final sacrifice at the end of the battle. It's kind of comedic looking back, but it's absolutely brilliant. In third place is the London Bridge battle from Spider-Man Far From Home. I think this is the scene that everybody was waiting for when it came to Spider-Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Spider-Man taking on an Avengers-level threat all by himself. Oh boy, yeah. And you know, this scene really does feel kind of exhausting. Spidey just gets absolutely put through his paces in this scene, both physically and mentally. He starts off by diving headfirst into what looks like the most dangerous creature he's ever faced, and pulls the veil on Mysterio's ultimate illusion. Then he's just getting beaten down repeatedly by a barrage of lethal drones, taking on a threat that is far bigger than he is. And he does it with a surprising amount of style. As well as that, all of Peter's friends are trapped in the London dungeon with Happy Hogan, hiding from Mysterio's drones, which again adds that level of tension where I think Jon Watts really loves. Sam Raimi had acrobatics, Mark Webb had odd boss battle arenas with crowds, and Jon Watts definitely has tension. And then we reach the final phase of the battle where Spider-Man has to rely only on his spider sense as he's all out of webs. He's just getting beaten down constantly in this fight scene, having to use all of his resolve, with no other superheroes that he can rely on. And the scene where Mysterio tries to shoot Spider-Man and he catches it, chills, man. This scene is absolutely intense, and truly a testament to the man that Spider-Man has become. Before we reach the final two, just a quick honorable mention. Avengers Endgame wasn't very heavy on Spidey-centric scenes because he only really got to take part in the final battle, which was a sprawling battle amongst every Avenger we've ever met. And Spider-Man seems to get pretty lost in that, and that's absolutely fine, it's not a Spider-Man film. But I will say the reunion between Spider-Man and Tony Stark is absolutely wonderful, as Peter finally gets that fatherly hug from Tony Stark that he's been wanting all this time. Okay, so in second place we have the Berlin battle from Spider-Man Far From Home. I think this battle is to MCU Spidey what the train scene was to Raimi Spidey. And funny enough, it does actually involve a train. While going to tell Nick Fury about Mysterio's evil plans, Mysterio intercepts Spider-Man. Now, I think Mysterio might just be the most unrelenting and vicious enemy Spidey has ever faced by himself. And boy, does this scene prove it. As Mysterio uses the drones that Spidey gave him to create a horrible nightmare-like illusion for Peter, with Spider-Man being trapped in Mysterio's world and in his own nightmare. And it is as creative as you would hope it would be. In this scene, we revisit multiple different Spider-Man suits from the past. We have Spider-Man battling reflections of himself, being haunted by Mysterio in the halls of his school, returning to a distorted vision of Queens, having MJ dropped from the Eiffel Tower, a Marvel Zombies reference with the zombie of Tony Stark attacking Peter, and Peter being trapped in a snow globe of New York, which happens to be Mysterio's head, which he then goes on to lift off. It's trippy, it's psychedelic, it's terrifying. It's perfect. It's exactly the reason I wanted to see Mysterio adapted to the big screen. I really hope we see Mysterio return someday because I would love to see more of this stuff. This is probably the most inventive, creative Spider-Man action sequence we've ever seen, maybe one of the most creative action sequences we've seen in a superhero movie. And while it is all CGI, I believe anyway, it actually has a good reason to be. It's a nightmarish world. I mean, why wouldn't it be computer generated? It literally, within the film, is computer generated. Mysterio is my favorite Spider-Man villain of all time, even before Spider-Man Far From Home came out, so to see that they've done such a loving job with him, with this scene especially, I just feel privileged, man. And in first place for the #1 best Spidey moment in the MCU is Spider-Man Far From Home's mid-credits ending scene. So Spidey has just had his very first final swing in the MCU, his very first swing through New York City. He's got the girl, he's come into his own, he's his own independent superhero ready to take on the world. And then we get the first appearance of J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson for the first time in over 10 years, presenting us footage of Mysterio doing the ultimate heckin' bamboozle. He starts by framing Spider-Man for the attacks on London and accusing Spider-Man of his murder, as a shocked crowd in New York City looks at the screen, at the manipulated footage prepared by Mysterio. But then it gets that much worse. Mysterio finally is the very first Spider-Man villain to finally actually do this, reveals Peter Parker's true identity to the world. As far as the world is concerned, Spider-Man is now a murderer, and worse yet, everybody knows who he is. This just sweeps the game board. You cannot top an ending like this. Spider-Man just had his ultimate victorious celebratory moment, and now Mysterio, the magnificent dirtbag that he is, has pulled the rug under Spidey one last time. And it's all presented by J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson reprising his role. So many shocks, so many surprises in one brief moment, this scene just gives me anxiety. It's probably the ultimate water cooler moment in a superhero film. What do you guys think? What are your favorite MCU Spidey moments? Comment below and discuss, and as always, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, don't forget to hit subscribe, hit the like button, and in the description below are links to my Patreon and my Discord. Coming up next is the trailer for Marvelous Tales of Spider-Man, my own Spidey adventure, now recut and remastered, and that new version of the film will be released on September 20th, and it will be premiering, so please do be there. Hey, dude, have you heard about the seminar?
No, what about it?
It's canceled, dude.
Really?
You didn't get the notification?
No, I didn't.
Oh, well, it's canceled.
Yeah, well, I came all this way for nothing then. Hey, you wanna hang out?
No.
I just heard there was a gunman. Tracy, you gotta get out of there. Tracy? Tracy.
Okay, so I guess the best advice I could give to anybody is this. Evaluate your circumstances, be brave. Be prepared to fail, but always get up. You owe it to yourself to be marvelous, so why regret being anything less? Well said. I'll see you around, buddy.
Channel Pup has been growing more than I could ever have anticipated over this very short space of time, and I'm absolutely honored to see so many viewers participating in discussions and really enjoying my little projects here. But it's not without its obstacles. I'm currently a student studying film and television, and if I want to afford the general costs that come with living, unfortunately YouTube revenue just can't always cut that cheese. I recently moved in with my girlfriend's family, but this is not a permanent thing, it's just for the summer. And last year I've done the whole act of balancing YouTube, balancing a job, and balancing university, and trust me, the content suffers every single time. So to support this channel to maintain the same quality of content and upload schedule, and to just keep making the stuff you guys really seem to be enjoying, I really do urge you to check out my Patreon link in the description below. And in return, you can get early access previews to the special Channel Pup events such as Marvelous Tales of Spider-Man Episode 2, as well as my upcoming Patreon exclusive playlist, Pup's Project Room, which is all unlockable with a pledge of just $1 or more. Now, the world's a tricky place. Not everybody is made of money, and that's fine. Just please be here for my videos. Please don't stop coming back to join me on these discussions, because it means so much to me, guys, really. Well, I guess I best be hitting the old dusty trail. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I've been Channel Pup, and I'll think of a better catchphrase next time. Now please leave me alone!